The elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor, and Marcus Chen stepped out into the marble lobby of Pinnacle Financial Tower. 23 years had passed since he'd first walked through these same doors as a nervous intern, clutching a worn leather briefcase his grandmother had given him. Back then, the security guard barely looked up from his newspaper. Today, that same guard, now graying and wearing reading glasses, stood up immediately and nodded with respect. "I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss." "Good morning, Mr. Chen." Marcus smiled and returned the greeting, but his mind was elsewhere. In exactly 30 minutes, he would walk into the boardroom where his former colleagues still worked, the same people who had laughed when a 22-year-old college graduate declared he would one day run his own company. They had no idea that the mysterious new owner of their building, the one who had purchased it for $800 million just 6 months ago, was standing in their elevator, adjusting his tie, and remembering every snide comment they had ever made. The year was 2001, and Marcus Chen had just graduated from State University with a degree in business administration and a GPA that barely scraped by at 2.8. While his classmates landed prestigious positions at Goldman Sachs or McKinsey, Marcus found himself grateful for an unpaid internship at Berkshire and Associates, a mid-tier investment firm housed in what was then called the Metropolitan Business Center. His first day at Berkshire and Associates felt like stepping into a different world. The office occupied 3 floors of the 30-story building, and everything from the Italian leather chairs to the hand-carved mahogany conference table screamed old money and established success. Marcus wore his only suit, a navy blue outfit his mother had bought him from a discount store, and carried his grandmother's briefcase, which looked ancient compared to the sleek aluminum cases his new colleagues carried. The internship coordinator, Janet Morrison, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who had worked at the firm for over 2 decades. She led Marcus through the maze of cubicles and corner offices, introducing him to various employees with the kind of perfunctory politeness reserved for temporary help. "This is Marcus Chen, our new intern," she announced to a group of junior analysts gathered around the coffee machine. "He'll be with us for the summer." The junior analysts looked him up and down with barely concealed amusement. There was Bradley Hoffman, a Harvard MBA whose father had connections throughout Wall Street. Next to him stood Amanda Richards, a sharp-tongued woman from Wharton who had already made it clear she considered this internship beneath her abilities. The third member of their informal group was Trevor Walsh, a cocky Princeton graduate who wore his Ivy League education like a designer suit. "Welcome to the real world," Trevor said with a smirk, extending his hand in a grip that was just a little too firm. "Hope you're ready to learn how things actually work." Marcus took the handshake and smiled. "I'm looking forward to it." "Where did you go to school?" Amanda asked, though her tone suggested she had already guessed the answer wouldn't impress her. "State University," Marcus replied evenly. The 3 exchanged glances that didn't go unnoticed. Bradley cleared his throat. "Well, every office needs someone to handle the grunt work." Marcus's first weeks at Berkshire and Associates were exactly what Bradley had predicted: grunt work. He spent his days making copies, organizing files, and running errands that took him all over downtown. While his fellow interns were invited to client meetings and strategy sessions, Marcus found himself relegated to the supply closet, taking inventory of printer paper and toner cartridges. The real blow came during his 3rd week, when Janet Morrison called him into her office. Her desk was covered with performance evaluations, and Marcus could see his name on several of them. "Marcus, I need to be direct with you," she began, removing her reading glasses and fixing him with a stern look. "Your performance so far has been concerning." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "I've been doing everything that's been asked of me." "That's exactly the problem," Janet replied. "You're doing what's asked of you, nothing more. The other interns are showing initiative, asking questions, positioning themselves for future opportunities. You're behaving like someone who's just happy to be here." The criticism stung because it contained a grain of truth. Marcus had been so focused on not making mistakes that he hadn't taken any risks or shown any creativity. He was so grateful for the opportunity that he had forgotten to prove he deserved it. "I can do better," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. Janet studied him for a long moment. "I hope so, because right now, you're not meeting the standards we expect from our interns. You have 2 weeks to turn this around, or we'll have to discuss ending your internship early." Marcus left Janet's office feeling like he had been punched in the gut. He walked past the break room where Bradley, Amanda, and Trevor were discussing their latest assignment, a market analysis project that would be presented to senior partners. None of them had been given such an opportunity, and Marcus realized he was falling further behind every day. That evening, Marcus stayed late in the office, long after the cleaning crew had finished their rounds. He used his intern access card to enter the research library, a room filled with financial journals, market reports, and industry analyses that dated back decades. While his colleagues were probably out at expensive restaurants or exclusive bars, Marcus spread out on the library floor and began reading everything he could get his hands on. He started with basic market theory, but quickly moved on to more complex topics. He studied merger and acquisition strategies, analyzed hostile takeover cases, and pored over annual reports from companies that had risen from obscurity to dominance. Most importantly, he began to understand the patterns that separated successful businesses from failures. Marcus discovered that many of the greatest business success stories started with someone who was underestimated, someone who had been counted out by the establishment. Sam Walton had been dismissed by competitors who thought his discount strategy would never work in rural America. Michael Dell had been told he was crazy for wanting to sell computers directly to consumers. Steve Jobs had been fired from his own company, only to return and transform it into the most valuable corporation in the world. As Marcus read these stories in the quiet of the research library, something began to shift in his mindset. He realized that being underestimated wasn't necessarily a disadvantage, it could be a source of motivation and a strategic advantage. While his colleagues were focused on impressing their supervisors with their credentials, Marcus could focus on developing actual skills and insights. He began to formulate a plan. Instead of trying to compete with Bradley, Amanda, and Trevor on their terms, he would find a different path. He would become indispensable not because of where he went to school, but because of what he could deliver. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office an hour early. He had prepared a detailed analysis of Berkshire and Associates' client portfolio, identifying patterns and potential opportunities that he planned to present to Janet Morrison. But as he walked toward her office, he overheard a conversation that stopped him in his tracks. "The intern situation is getting ridiculous," Trevor was saying to Bradley and Amanda. They were standing by the elevator, waiting for their ride to the 35th floor where the senior partners had their offices. "You mean Marcus?" Amanda asked, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Of course I mean Marcus," Trevor replied. "Did you see him last night? Still here at 9 o'clock, surrounded by all those dusty old books. It's pathetic, really. He's trying so hard to prove he belongs here." Bradley laughed. "My father always said you can't teach class. Some people are just born for this business, and others, well, others are meant to serve coffee and make copies." "The funny thing is," Amanda added, "yesterday he actually told me he wants to run his own company someday. Can you imagine? Marcus Chen, CEO of something." The three of them burst into laughter that echoed through the elevator lobby. Trevor wiped tears from his eyes. "CEO Marcus Chen. That's rich. Maybe he can be CEO of a copy center or something. Or a janitorial service," Bradley suggested, which sent them into fresh peals of laughter. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and the three stepped inside, still chuckling about Marcus's supposed delusions of grandeur. The doors closed, leaving Marcus standing alone in the lobby, his carefully prepared analysis clutched in his hands. For a moment, Marcus felt the familiar sting of humiliation that had followed him throughout his childhood and college years. He had always been the kid who didn't quite fit in, who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But as he stood there in the empty lobby, something different happened. Instead of shame, he felt a cold, clarifying anger. They thought he was delusional for wanting to be a CEO. They found it hilarious that someone like him could aspire to leadership. Fine. Let them laugh. Marcus made a decision that would shape the next 2 decades of his life. He would prove them wrong, and when he did, he would make sure they knew exactly who had accomplished what they thought was impossible. Marcus walked to Janet Morrison's office and knocked on her door. When she looked up from her computer, he could see the skepticism in her eyes. "I've prepared something I'd like to show you," Marcus said, his voice calm and confident. Janet glanced at her watch. "You have 5 minutes." Marcus opened his folder and began to present his analysis. He had identified 3 potential acquisition targets that perfectly aligned with Berkshire and Associates' expansion strategy. More importantly, he had developed detailed financial models showing how each acquisition could increase the firm's revenue by 15 to 20% within 18 months. As Marcus spoke, he watched Janet's expression change from polite attention to genuine interest. She stopped glancing at her watch and started asking detailed questions about his methodology and assumptions. When he finished his presentation, Janet was quiet for a long moment. "Where did you get this data?" she finally asked. "A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I compiled it from public records, industry reports, and financial filings," Marcus replied. "Everything is sourced and verified." Janet studied the documents more carefully. This is graduate level analysis, Marcus. Are you sure you put this together yourself? Yes, ma'am. I spent the last 3 weeks working on it. Janet leaned back in her chair, clearly reassessing the young man sitting across from her desk. I have to admit, I'm impressed. This is the kind of strategic thinking we expect from our senior analysts, not our interns. I want to contribute more than just administrative tasks, Marcus said. I know I don't have the same background as the other interns, but I'm willing to work harder than anyone else to prove my value. Janet nodded slowly. I can see that. Tell me, Marcus, what do you want to get out of this internship? Marcus had rehearsed his answer to this question, but sitting in Janet's office, he decided to be completely honest. I want to learn everything I can about this business. I want to understand how successful companies are built and how they're managed. And someday, I want to apply that knowledge to build something of my own. You want to start your own firm? Janet asked. Eventually. Yes. I want to be in a position where I can make the decisions that shape a company's future. Janet smiled for the first time since Marcus had known her. That's ambitious. Most interns are just trying to get a job offer. I'm not most interns, Marcus replied. No, Janet agreed, you're certainly not. She stood up and walked to her window, which offered a view of the city skyline. I'm going to make you an offer, Marcus. I'm going to assign you to work directly with our mergers and acquisitions team. It's usually reserved for full-time analysts, but your research suggests you're ready for more challenging work. Marcus felt his heart race. I would be honored. There's one condition, Janet continued. This is a trial period. If you can't keep up with the workload or if your performance slips, you'll be back to making copies. Understood. Understood. As Marcus left Janet's office, he felt like he was walking on air. He had turned his internship around in a single meeting, and he was about to get the kind of experience that could launch his career. But more than that, he had taken the first step toward proving that Trevor, Bradley, and Amanda were wrong about him. He didn't know it at the time, but that conversation with Janet Morrison would be the beginning of a journey that would eventually lead him back to this building as its owner. The 3 people who had laughed at his ambitions would one day work for a company housed in a building he owned, and they would have no idea that the awkward intern they had mocked had become the power behind their paychecks. For now, though, Marcus was content to focus on the immediate challenge ahead of him. He had 2 weeks to prove himself to the mergers and acquisitions team, and he intended to exceed every expectation they had. The kid from State University was about to show everyone what underestimated really meant. Marcus's first day working with the M&A team began at 6:30 in the morning. The team leader, David Richardson, was a veteran analyst in his early 40s who had earned his reputation by identifying profitable deals that others missed. Richardson had agreed to take on Marcus as an experiment, partly because of Janet Morrison's recommendation and partly because he was curious to see what an intern could contribute to complex financial negotiations. Chen, right? Richardson said when Marcus appeared at his office door. Morrison tells me you've got some interesting ideas about market opportunities. Yes, sir. I've been studying the aerospace sector, and I think there are some undervalued companies that could be excellent acquisition targets. Richardson raised an eyebrow. Aerospace? That's not exactly beginner territory. What makes you think you understand that market? Marcus had anticipated this question. I spent last weekend reading through 5 years of industry reports and analyzing the financial statements of 37 companies in the sector. I found 3 that are trading below their intrinsic value because of temporary supply chain disruptions. Show me, Richardson said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder containing his analysis. He had color-coded different sections and created detailed charts showing revenue projections, market share data, and competitive positioning. As he explained his findings, Richardson's expression shifted from polite skepticism to genuine attention. This company here, Marcus said, pointing to a mid-sized manufacturer called Phoenix Dynamics, has been underperforming for 18 months because they lost a major defense contract. But their underlying technology is superior to their competitors. And they're about to announce a breakthrough in lightweight materials that could revolutionize aircraft manufacturing. How do you know about the breakthrough? Richardson asked sharply. Public patents filed 6 months ago, combined with recent hiring patterns and R&D expenditure increases, Marcus replied. The market hasn't connected these dots yet, but the indicators are all there. Richardson studied the documents for several minutes, occasionally making notes in the margins. Finally, he looked up at Marcus with a new level of respect. This is solid work, Chen. Better than solid, actually. I've been watching Phoenix Dynamics myself, but I hadn't considered the patent angle. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction, but he kept his expression neutral. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Richardson said with a slight smile. If you're going to work with my team, you'll need to prove you can handle the pressure. We're in the middle of analyzing a potential acquisition for Hartwell Industries, and I'm going to put you on the due diligence team. The Hartwell Industries project was Marcus's introduction to the intense, high-stakes world of corporate acquisitions. The target company was a struggling electronics manufacturer that Hartwell wanted to acquire for its intellectual property portfolio. Marcus found himself working 16-hour days, analyzing financial statements, conducting market research, and preparing presentations for senior executives. His colleagues on the due diligence team were seasoned professionals who initially viewed him with suspicion. There was Sarah Kim, a brilliant financial analyst who had earned her MBA from Northwestern, James Mueller, a former management consultant who specialized in operational efficiency, and Patricia Gonzalez, a legal expert who could spot potential regulatory issues from miles away. We've got an intern on the team now? Sarah asked Richardson during their first team meeting. Chen earned his spot, Richardson replied. He's here because he can contribute, not because we need someone to fetch coffee. Despite Richardson's endorsement, Marcus knew he would have to prove himself to his teammates every day. He threw himself into the work with an intensity that surprised even him. While Sarah, James, and Patricia went home to their families each evening, Marcus stayed in the office, poring over documents and looking for details that others might have missed. His breakthrough came during the third week of the project. Marcus was reviewing the target company's supplier contracts when he noticed an unusual pattern in their purchasing agreements. Several key suppliers had negotiated escalation clauses that would significantly increase costs if certain market conditions occurred. Marcus realized that these clauses could be triggered by the very acquisition that Hartwell was planning. If Hartwell acquires this company, Marcus explained to the team the next morning, their increased market share will trigger commodity price thresholds that activate the escalation clauses. The target company's operating costs could increase by 12% almost immediately. Patricia looked up from her legal documents. That's a significant financial impact. How did we miss this? The clauses are buried in subsidiary agreements that weren't included in the main contract summaries, Marcus replied. I had to cross-reference about 40 different documents to piece it together. Sarah frowned as she reviewed Marcus's analysis. This changes our valuation model completely. We need to recalculate the projected ROI. James nodded grimly. And we need to figure out whether Hartwell can renegotiate these supplier contracts before the acquisition closes. Richardson studied Marcus's findings with the kind of focused attention he usually reserved for senior analyst reports. How confident are you in this analysis, Chen? Very confident. I've verified the information with 3 different sources. Good work, Richardson said. This could save Hartwell millions of dollars, or it could kill the deal entirely. Either way, they need to know about it. The team spent the next 2 days incorporating Marcus's discovery into their final presentation. When they presented their findings to Hartwell's executive team, the CEO, Robert Hartwell himself, asked several pointed questions about the supplier contract analysis. Who identified this issue? Hartwell asked. Richardson glanced at Marcus. One of our analysts, Marcus Chen. Hartwell nodded approvingly. Outstanding work. This is exactly the kind of thoroughness we expect from Berkshire and Associates. As they left the meeting, Richardson pulled Marcus aside. That was impressive, Chen. You potentially saved our client $8 million in unexpected costs. Marcus felt a rush of pride, but he also realized that his success was creating tension with some of his former peers. When he returned to the office, he found Trevor Walsh waiting by his desk. Well, Trevor said with a sneer. Look who's moving up in the world. I heard you're working with the M&A team now. That's right, Marcus replied evenly. Don't let it go to your head, Trevor continued. You're still just an intern. Richardson probably just needs someone to organize his files. Marcus looked at Trevor for a long moment, remembering the conversation he had overheard by the elevator. Actually, I just helped identify a potential $8 million cost overrun in the Hartwell acquisition. Trevor's expression faltered slightly. $8 million? That's a significant amount. It is, Marcus agreed. But I'm sure you understand these things, being from Princeton and all. The subtle dig wasn't lost on Trevor, who clearly wasn't used to being challenged by someone he considered beneath him. You got lucky, Chen. Don't mistake one good catch for actual competence. Maybe, Marcus said with a slight smile. Or maybe I'm better at this than you thought. Trevor walked away. Without another word, but Marcus could see the uncertainty in his eyes. For the first time, one of his tormentors was beginning to doubt their assessment of his abilities. Word of Marcus's success on the Hartwell project spread quickly through the office. Janet Morrison congratulated him personally, and several senior analysts began including him in strategy discussions. More importantly, David Richardson offered him a permanent position on the M&A team once his internship ended. "I can't offer you the same salary as our MBA hires," Richardson explained, "but I can give you opportunities to work on deals that most first-year analysts never see." Marcus accepted immediately. He understood that Richardson was offering him something more valuable than money. He was offering him a chance to learn from some of the best dealmakers in the industry. As his internship drew to a close, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his situation had changed. 3 months earlier, he had been making copies and fetching coffee. Now he was analyzing multi-million-dollar transactions and contributing to strategic decisions that affected major corporations. The other interns were preparing for their final presentations, hoping to secure job offers from Berkshire and Associates. Bradley Hoffman had lined up a position in the wealth management division, leveraging his family connections. Amanda Richards was joining the corporate strategy team, where her Wharton credentials would open doors to high-profile clients. Trevor Walsh had secured a spot in the investment banking group, the most prestigious division at the firm. Marcus's path was different. He wasn't joining a traditional department with a clear hierarchy and established procedures. Instead, he was becoming part of Richardson's specialized team, where success would depend entirely on his ability to identify opportunities and solve complex problems. During his final week as an intern, Marcus was working late in the office when he encountered Amanda Richards by the copy machine. She was preparing materials for her final presentation, and she looked stressed. "Long night?" Marcus asked. Amanda looked up, clearly frazzled. "I'm trying to finish this market analysis, but I can't figure out why my numbers don't match the industry benchmarks." Marcus glanced at her documents. "Mind if I take a look?" Amanda hesitated, then handed him her spreadsheet. Marcus studied it for a few minutes, then pointed to a formula in one of the cells. "You're double counting the international revenue figures," he said. "The subsidiary data is already included in the parent company totals." Amanda's eyes widened as she realized her mistake. "Oh my God, you're right. I would have presented completely wrong numbers tomorrow." "Easy mistake to make," Marcus said diplomatically. Amanda looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "Thank you. I owe you one." Marcus smiled. "Don't worry about it. We're all on the same team." As Amanda corrected her analysis, Marcus couldn't help but think about how different this interaction was from their first meeting. 3 months ago, she had looked at him like he was barely qualified to carry her briefcase. Now she was grateful for his help with a problem she couldn't solve herself. The final intern presentations took place in the main conference room, with senior partners and department heads in attendance. Bradley spoke confidently about wealth preservation strategies for high-net-worth clients. Amanda delivered a polished analysis of emerging market opportunities. Trevor presented a complex derivatives trading strategy that impressed the investment banking team. When Marcus's turn came, he chose to present his aerospace industry analysis, the same research that had first caught David Richardson's attention. But instead of simply presenting his findings, Marcus explained his methodology and the lessons he had learned about identifying undervalued opportunities in complex markets. The key insight, Marcus explained to the room, is that markets often misprice assets during periods of temporary disruption. Companies with strong fundamentals and superior technology can appear vulnerable when they're actually positioned for significant growth. Robert Brennan, one of the senior partners, leaned forward in his chair. "That's a sophisticated perspective, Mr. Chen. How do you plan to apply this insight in your career?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Eventually, I'd like to build my own investment firm, focusing on identifying and developing undervalued companies in emerging technology sectors." The room fell silent. Most interns concluded their presentations by expressing their eagerness to contribute to Berkshire and Associates' continued success. Marcus had just announced his intention to eventually become a competitor. Brennan smiled. "That's an ambitious goal. What makes you think you can succeed in such a competitive industry?" "Because I understand what it's like to be underestimated," Marcus replied. "I know how to find value that others overlook, and I know how to work harder than anyone expects." After the presentations, the interns gathered for a farewell reception. Trevor approached Marcus with a drink in his hand and a condescending smile on his face. "So, Chen, you're really going to try to start your own firm someday?" "That's the plan," Marcus replied. Trevor laughed. "You realize how many people try to start investment firms and fail, right? It takes more than just ambition." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "It takes capital, connections, and credibility. But most importantly, it takes the ability to deliver results that others can't." "And you think you have that ability?" Amanda asked, Joining the conversation, Marcus looked at both of them, remembering their laughter from months earlier. I guess we'll find out. Bradley appeared beside Trevor, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. What are we talking about? Marcus is telling us about his plans to become a CEO, Trevor said with barely concealed amusement. Bradley nearly choked on his champagne. CEO? Of what company? One that I'm going to build, Marcus said calmly. The 3 of them exchanged glances, and Marcus could see they were fighting back laughter. But something had changed since their elevator conversation. There was less certainty in their mockery, less confidence in their dismissal of his ambitions. Well, Bradley said finally, I wish you luck with that. Thanks, Marcus replied. I appreciate it. As the reception continued, Marcus found himself standing alone by the window, looking out at the city skyline. In a few months, he would begin his first full-time job as a junior analyst on Richardson's M&A team. It wasn't the most glamorous position, and it certainly wasn't the highest paying, but it was exactly what he needed to continue his education in the art of building successful businesses. David Richardson appeared beside him, also looking out at the city lights. Second thoughts about joining the team? Richardson asked. No second thoughts, Marcus replied. I'm looking forward to it. Good. Because I have a feeling you're going to see opportunities that the rest of us miss. Marcus smiled. That's the plan. Just remember, Richardson said, the best dealmakers aren't the ones who know the most about finance. They're the ones who understand human nature and can see potential where others see problems. As Marcus left the office that evening, he thought about Richardson's words. He had learned a lot about financial analysis and market dynamics during his internship, but the most valuable lesson had been about the power of persistence and the importance of exceeding expectations. Trevor, Bradley, and Amanda had underestimated him because they judged him based on his background rather than his capabilities. Marcus was determined to ensure that would be the last time anyone made that mistake. 2 years into his full-time position at Berkshire and Associates, Marcus Chen had established himself as one of the most reliable analysts in the M&A division. His reputation for uncovering hidden risks and identifying overlooked opportunities had earned him the respect of senior partners and the grudging acknowledgement of his former tormentors. But Marcus knew that respect within the firm was only the first step toward his ultimate goal. The financial industry in 2003 was experiencing a period of unprecedented growth. Technology companies were recovering from the dot-com crash, and private equity firms were beginning to emerge as major players in corporate acquisitions. Marcus watched these trends with the keen eye of someone who understood that timing was everything in business. His opportunity came in the form of a struggling software company called Dataflow Systems. The company had developed innovative database management software but was hemorrhaging money due to poor financial management and an outdated business model. Most analysts saw Dataflow as a cautionary tale about the dangers of the tech sector. Marcus saw it as a diamond in the rough. You want to recommend that we acquire a company that's losing $2 million a quarter? Sarah Kim asked during a team meeting. She had been promoted to senior analyst and was now Marcus's immediate supervisor, though their relationship had evolved into something closer to partnership than hierarchy. I want to recommend that we help our client acquire their intellectual property and restructure their operations, Marcus corrected. Dataflow's software is 3 years ahead of anything their competitors are offering. The problem isn't their product, it's their execution. James Mueller, who had also been promoted and was now leading the operational analysis division, shook his head. Even if the software is superior, the company is fundamentally broken. They've burned through $40 million in venture capital, and they're still not profitable. Which is exactly why we can acquire them for a fraction of their actual value, Marcus argued. Their current valuation is based on their financial performance, not their technological assets. A strategic buyer could restructure their costs, refocus their marketing, and turn this into a $100 million business within 3 years. David Richardson had been listening to the debate with interest. What kind of buyer are you thinking about, Marcus? Someone in the enterprise software space who understands the value of Dataflow's technology but has the infrastructure to monetize it properly, Marcus replied. I've identified 3 potential acquirers who could integrate Dataflow's capabilities into their existing platforms. Richardson nodded thoughtfully. Put together a full analysis. If your numbers make sense, we'll pitch it to the client. Marcus spent the next 3 weeks developing the most comprehensive acquisition proposal of his career. He analyzed Dataflow's technology stack, interviewed former employees to understand their operational challenges, and created detailed financial models showing how different buyers could leverage the acquisition to increase their market share. His research revealed that Dataflow's core problem was that they had tried to be everything to everyone. Their software could handle database management, analytics, and reporting, but they had marketed it as 3 separate products to 3 different customer segments. This approach had diluted their brand and confused potential buyers. Marcus's solution was elegant in its simplicity. Position Dataflow as an acquisition target for companies that needed all 3 capabilities but didn't want to invest in developing the technology internally. Instead of seeing Dataflow as a failed startup, potential buyers would see it as a shortcut to technological superiority. The presentation took place in Berkshire and Associates' largest conference room, with representatives from Quantum Industries, a mid-sized enterprise software company that had been looking for ways to expand their product offerings. Marcus had prepared meticulously, anticipating every possible question and objection. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richardson began, "we have an acquisition opportunity that we believe represents exceptional value for Quantum Industries. Marcus Chen will walk you through the analysis." Marcus stood up, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with high-stakes presentations. Dataflow Systems is currently valued at $12 million, based on their financial performance. However, our analysis indicates that their technological assets alone are worth more than $60 million. The Quantum Industries CEO, Margaret Walsh, no relation to Trevor, leaned forward in her chair. "If their technology is so valuable, why is the company failing?" "Because they're trying to solve the wrong problem," Marcus replied. Dataflow has been positioning themselves as a competitor to established players like Oracle and Microsoft. But their real value lies in their ability to integrate database management, analytics, and reporting in ways that their larger competitors can't match. Marcus clicked to his next slide, which showed a detailed comparison of Dataflow's capabilities versus their competitors. For Quantum Industries, acquiring Dataflow would immediately give you technological parity with companies that have spent hundreds of millions on R&D. More importantly, it would give you capabilities that none of your direct competitors possess. Margaret Walsh studied the presentation materials carefully. "What about their operational issues? We don't want to inherit a money-losing business." "The operational issues are actually an advantage for the right buyer," Marcus explained. "Dataflow's current management team has been focused on building technology rather than building a sustainable business. Quantum already has the sales infrastructure, customer relationships, and operational expertise to monetize Dataflow's innovations." The presentation continued for 2 hours, with Marcus fielding questions about everything from technical integration challenges to regulatory compliance issues. By the end, even the most skeptical Quantum executives seemed convinced that the acquisition made strategic sense. 3 weeks later, Quantum Industries announced their acquisition of Dataflow Systems for $18 million, 50% more than Dataflow's market valuation and exactly what Marcus had predicted the bidding process would yield. The deal was hailed as a strategic masterstroke that would accelerate Quantum's growth by at least 2 years. The success of the Dataflow acquisition transformed Marcus's standing within Berkshire and Associates. Robert Brennan, the senior partner, who had questioned him during his intern presentation, personally congratulated him on the deal. "That was exceptional work, Marcus," Brennan said during their meeting. "You identified value that everyone else missed, and you structured the deal in a way that benefited everyone involved." "Thank you, sir. I'm glad we could deliver results for the client." "I'm promoting you to senior analyst," Brennan continued. "You'll be leading your own deals now, with full responsibility for client relationships and transaction execution." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction, but he also knew that this promotion would change his relationship with his former colleagues. As a senior analyst, he would now be competing directly with people like Bradley, Amanda, and Trevor for the most prestigious assignments and the highest value clients. The first test of his new authority came sooner than expected. Brennan assigned him to lead a team analyzing the potential acquisition of a regional airline by one of their largest clients, Continental Holdings. The target company, Midwest Regional Airways, was struggling with fuel costs and aging aircraft, but they controlled valuable route rights that could be worth hundreds of millions to the right buyer. Marcus's team included several analysts who had previously outranked him, including Amanda Richards, who had been promoted to senior analyst 6 months earlier. The first team meeting was awkward, with Amanda clearly uncomfortable taking direction from someone she had once dismissed as unqualified. "I've reviewed the preliminary financials," Amanda said, "and I don't see how this deal makes sense. Midwest Regional is bleeding money, and their fleet needs major upgrades." "You're looking at their current performance," Marcus replied. "But Continental Holdings isn't interested in buying an airline, they're interested in buying route rights and landing slots. The actual aircraft and operations are secondary considerations." Amanda frowned. "But the operational losses are significant. Even if Continental values the route rights highly, they still have to deal with the underlying business." "Not necessarily," Marcus said. pulling up a diagram he had prepared. Continental could acquire Midwest Regional, transfer the valuable routes to their existing operations, and then liquidate or sell the remaining assets. The route rights alone are worth more than the acquisition price we're discussing. James Mueller, who was also on the team, looked skeptical. That's a complex transaction. Are you sure Continental has the expertise to execute something like that? They've done similar deals before, Marcus replied. 3 years ago, they acquired Pacific Coast Airlines specifically for their West Coast routes. They kept the profitable routes, sold the aircraft, and shut down the unprofitable operations. The team spent 6 weeks analyzing every aspect of the potential acquisition. Marcus pushed them to look beyond traditional financial metrics and focus on strategic value creation. He had learned that the most successful deals weren't always the ones that looked good on paper, they were the ones that solved real problems for the acquiring company. Their analysis revealed that Midwest Regional's route rights could increase Continental Holdings' market share in the Midwest by 30%, giving them dominant positions in Chicago, Detroit, and Minneapolis. More importantly, these routes would create a hub-and-spoke network that could generate synergies worth over $50 million annually. The final presentation to Continental Holdings took place in their corporate headquarters, a gleaming tower that overlooked the city's financial district. Marcus had prepared for weeks, but he still felt nervous as he walked into the boardroom where Continental's executive team was waiting. "Mr. Chen," said Continental's CEO, Richard Lawson, "we understand you've identified some interesting opportunities in the Midwest regional situation." "Yes, sir. We believe this acquisition represents a unique opportunity to transform Continental's competitive position in the Midwest market." Marcus began his presentation with a detailed analysis of the airline industry's route economics, explaining how certain routes became more valuable as market consolidation increased. He then showed how Midwest Regional's financial struggles had created a temporary disconnect between their route values and their market price. "The key insight," Marcus explained, "is that Midwest Regional's routes are complementary to Continental's existing network rather than competitive with it. Acquiring these routes would create a hub-and-spoke system that generates network effects worth significantly more than the sum of individual route values." Lawson studied the financial projections carefully. "These synergy estimates seem aggressive. How confident are you in these numbers?" "Very confident," Marcus replied. "We've modeled similar network effects in other airline mergers, and our projections are actually conservative compared to industry benchmarks." The presentation continued for 3 hours, with Marcus and his team fielding detailed questions about everything from regulatory approval processes to aircraft integration challenges. Marcus noticed that Amanda had contributed significantly to the technical analysis, and he made sure to acknowledge her expertise during the presentation. 2 months later, Continental Holdings announced their acquisition of Midwest Regional Airways for $230 million. The deal was structured exactly as Marcus had recommended, with Continental acquiring the route rights and operational assets separately. Within 18 months, the acquired routes were generating the projected synergies, and Continental's stock price had increased by 40%. The success of the Continental Midwest Regional deal established Marcus as one of Berkshire and Associates' most valuable senior analysts. He was invited to join the firm's strategic planning committee and was given the first choice of high-profile assignments. More importantly, he was beginning to build the network of relationships that would be essential for his long-term career. Goals.at the firm's annual holiday party, Marcus found himself in conversation with several senior partners and managing directors. The atmosphere was relaxed, with expensive wine and catered food creating an environment where normally formal business relationships became more personal. "Marcus," said Patricia Brennan, Robert's wife and a successful attorney in her own right. "Robert tells me you're interested in eventually starting your own firm." "That's a long-term goal," Marcus replied diplomatically. "Right now, I'm focused on learning as much as I can at Berkshire." "Smart approach," said William Harrison, the firm's managing director. "Too many young analysts try to jump into entrepreneurship before they understand how the business really works." Marcus nodded. "I want to make sure I have the experience and relationships necessary to succeed before I make that leap." "What kind of firm are you thinking about?" Patricia asked. "Something focused on identifying undervalued opportunities in emerging technology sectors," Marcus said. "I think there are a lot of innovative companies that are overlooked by traditional investors because they don't fit conventional valuation models." Harrison raised his eyebrows. "That's a competitive space. What would differentiate your approach?" Marcus had thought about this question many times. "I think the key is understanding that innovation often comes from unexpected places. The most successful technology companies aren't always the ones with the best credentials or the most prestigious backers. Sometimes they're the ones that everyone else underestimates. As the evening continued, Marcus noticed Trevor Walsh standing near the bar, engaged in animated conversation with several other analysts. Their eyes met across the room, and Trevor raised his glass in a mock toast. Marcus responded with a polite nod, but he couldn't help remembering their first encounter and Trevor's dismissive attitude toward his ambitions. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Trevor approached Marcus directly. "Congratulations on the Continental deal," Trevor said, his tone more respectful than Marcus had ever heard from him. "Thank you. It was a team effort. Still, you were the lead analyst. That's impressive for someone who's only been here a few years." Marcus studied Trevor's expression, trying to determine whether this was genuine congratulation or some kind of setup for another put-down. "I've been fortunate to work on some interesting transactions." "More than fortunate," Trevor said. "You've built quite a reputation. People are starting to take notice." "I appreciate that." Trevor hesitated, then continued. "Look, I know we didn't get off to the best start when you were an intern. I may have underestimated your potential." Marcus was surprised by this admission. "We were all learning back then." "Maybe," Trevor said. "But I wanted you to know that I respect what you've accomplished. The Continental deal was brilliant work." As Trevor walked away, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since his first day at Berkshire and Associates. The people who had once dismissed him as an unqualified intern were now treating him as a peer, and in some cases, as someone whose success they envied, but Marcus knew that earning respect within Berkshire and Associates was only the beginning of his journey. His ultimate goal wasn't to climb the corporate ladder within someone else's firm, it was to build something of his own. And that would require not just analytical skills and industry knowledge, but also the capital, connections, and credibility that could only come from years of successful deal-making. The foundation was being laid, brick by brick, relationship by relationship, deal by deal. Marcus Chen was no longer the awkward intern who had been mocked for his ambitions. He was becoming exactly what he had always claimed he would be, someone who could see opportunities that others missed, someone who could turn vision into reality. Someone who could build something lasting and valuable. The question was no longer whether he could succeed, it was how spectacular that success would be. By 2007, Marcus Chen had been promoted to vice president at Berkshire and Associates, making him one of the youngest VPs in the firm's history. His track record spoke for itself, 17 successful acquisitions totaling over $3 billion in transaction value, with an average return to clients that exceeded industry benchmarks by 40%. Yet despite his professional success, Marcus felt increasingly restless within the confines of corporate structure. The catalyst for change came during a client dinner at Le Bernardin, where Marcus was entertaining executives from TechVenture Capital, a Silicon Valley firm that specialized in growth-stage technology investments. The conversation had turned to emerging trends in artificial intelligence and machine learning, topics that fascinated Marcus but were considered too speculative for most traditional investment firms. "The problem with Wall Street," said Jennifer Larson, TechVenture's managing partner, "is that you're all looking backward. You analyze what companies have done, not what they could become." Marcus set down his wine glass and leaned forward. "That's an interesting perspective. What do you mean exactly?" "Take artificial intelligence," Jennifer continued. "There are dozens of small companies developing breakthrough technologies that could transform entire industries. But traditional analysts dismiss them because they don't have revenue histories or proven business models. How do you evaluate potential in companies that don't have traditional metrics?" Marcus asked. Jennifer smiled. "You look at the quality of their innovation, the size of the market opportunity, and the capability of their leadership teams. Financial statements tell you where a company has been. Vision tells you where it's going." The conversation continued long after the dinner plates had been cleared, with Marcus asking detailed questions about TechVenture's investment philosophy and methodology. By the end of the evening, he had filled 6 pages of his notebook with ideas and insights that would reshape his thinking about value creation. Over the following weeks, Marcus began researching the venture capital and growth equity markets with the same intensity he had once applied to traditional M&A analysis. He discovered a world of innovative companies that were developing technologies with the potential to create entirely new industries, but which were largely ignored by established investment firms because they didn't fit conventional evaluation criteria. His breakthrough insight came while reviewing the financial statements of a small robotics company called Precision Dynamics. The company had developed revolutionary manufacturing automation technology, but their revenue was minimal because they were still in the development phase. Traditional analysts would have dismissed them as too risky and unproven. Marcus saw something different. He analyzed their patent portfolio, interviewed their engineering team, and studied the potential applications of their technology across multiple industries. His research revealed that Precision Dynamics had solved fundamental problems that had plagued manufacturing automation for decades, and their solutions could reduce production costs by up to 30% for companies that implemented them. The opportunity was enormous, but it would require a different kind of investment approach. Instead of acquiring Precision Dynamics outright, Marcus envisioned providing them with growth capital and strategic guidance that would help them scale their operations and commercialize their technology. This hybrid approach, combining venture capital principles with traditional M&A expertise, could create value for both investors and entrepreneurs. Marcus spent 3 months developing a comprehensive business plan for his own investment firm. He called it Chin Capital Partners, and he positioned it as a bridge between the innovation-focused venture capital world and the execution-focused traditional finance industry. The firm would specialize in identifying breakthrough technologies that had reached commercial viability but needed capital and expertise to achieve market dominance. The business plan was ambitious but carefully researched. Marcus projected that Chin Capital Partners could raise an initial fund of $50 million and generate annual returns of 25 to 30% by focusing on undervalued technology companies with proven innovations. More importantly, he had identified a pipeline of potential investments that met his criteria for revolutionary technology combined with commercial potential. The decision to leave Berkshire and Associates was one of the most difficult of Marcus's career. The firm had been his professional home for 6 years, and he had built strong relationships with colleagues and clients who had supported his rise through the ranks. David Richardson, who had become both a mentor and a friend, was particularly disappointed when Marcus announced his intention to resign. "You're making a mistake, Marcus," Richardson said during their final meeting. "You have a clear path to partnership here. In 5 years, you could be running your own division with unlimited resources and established client relationships. I appreciate everything you've done for me, David. But I need to build something of my own." Richardson shook his head. 90% of new investment firms fail within their first 3 years. The competition is brutal, and the barrier to entry is getting higher every year. "You're right about the risks," Marcus acknowledged. "But I think there's an opportunity that established firms can't pursue because of their existing client obligations and risk parameters." "What kind of opportunity?" Marcus pulled out his laptop and opened a presentation he had prepared. "There are breakthrough technologies being developed by small companies that could transform entire industries, but they're being overlooked because they don't fit traditional investment models." He showed Richardson his analysis of Precision Dynamics, along with profiles of 6 other companies that had developed potentially revolutionary technologies but were struggling to access growth capital. Each company represented a different sector: robotics, biotechnology, renewable energy, advanced materials, but they all shared the same challenge: their innovations were too advanced for traditional investors to understand and too early stage for conventional acquisition strategies. "These companies need more than just capital," Marcus explained. "They need strategic guidance, operational expertise, and access to markets that can help them commercialize their innovations. Chin Capital Partners would provide all of those things." Richardson studied the presentation materials carefully. "This is sophisticated analysis, Marcus. But it's also extremely high risk. How do you plan to convince investors to back an unproven fund manager pursuing speculative investments?" "By demonstrating that I can identify value that others miss," Marcus replied. "My track record at Berkshire shows that I understand how to evaluate opportunities and execute complex transactions. Chin Capital Partners would apply those same skills to a different type of investment opportunity." Despite Richardson's concerns, he ultimately supported Marcus's decision to pursue entrepreneurship. On Marcus's last day at Berkshire and Associates, Richardson presented him with a leather-bound portfolio containing letters of recommendation from every senior partner at the firm. "You're going to need these when you start raising capital," Richardson said. "And remember, you'll always have friends here if things don't work out." Marcus's first challenge as an entrepreneur was raising the initial fund for Chin Capital Partners. Unlike established firms that could rely on institutional investors and pension funds, Marcus had to build his investor base from scratch. He started by reaching out to successful entrepreneurs and family offices that specialized in alternative investments. His breakthrough came through an introduction to Harrison Blake, a technology entrepreneur who had built and sold 3 successful companies over the past 15 years. Blake had accumulated significant wealth from his exits and was looking for opportunities to invest in the next generation of innovative companies. "I like your approach," Blake said after reviewing Marcus's business plan. "Most investment firms are either pure venture capital or pure private equity. You're proposing something that combines the best of both worlds." Exactly, Marcus replied. Traditional VC firms provide capital but often lack the operational expertise to help companies scale efficiently. Private equity firms have operational knowledge but typically focus on mature companies rather than breakthrough innovations. Blake nodded thoughtfully. How much capital are you looking to raise for the initial fund? $50 million, with the possibility of increasing to $75 million if we identify additional qualified opportunities. And you're planning to take board seats in your portfolio companies? In most cases, yes. I want to be actively involved in helping these companies achieve their potential. Blake smiled. I'll commit $10 million to your fund, Marcus. But I have one condition. What's that? I want to co-invest directly in any deals that particularly interest me. I like being involved with innovative companies, and I think my experience could be valuable to your portfolio. Marcus accepted Blake's terms immediately. Having a successful entrepreneur as both an investor and a strategic partner would add credibility to Chin Capital Partners and provide valuable expertise for portfolio companies. Over the next 6 months, Marcus raised $48 million from a carefully selected group of investors that included successful entrepreneurs, family offices, and high-net-worth individuals who specialized in technology investments. Each investor brought not just capital but also networks and expertise that could benefit Chin Capital Partners' portfolio companies. The firm's first investment was in Precision Dynamics, the robotics company that had inspired Marcus's initial business plan. Marcus led a $12 million funding round that gave Chin Capital Partners a 35% stake in the company, along with 2 board seats and significant influence over strategic direction. Working with Precision Dynamics was unlike anything Marcus had experienced during his years at Berkshire and Associates. Instead of analyzing completed transactions, he was actively involved in building a company from the ground up. He helped recruit an experienced CEO, established partnerships with major manufacturing companies, and developed a go-to-market strategy that positioned Precision Dynamics as the leader in next-generation factory automation. The transformation was remarkable. Within 18 months, Precision Dynamics had grown from a 12-person engineering team operating out of a converted warehouse to a 150-person company with manufacturing facilities in 3 states and customers on 4 continents. Their revenue had increased from virtually nothing to $40 million annually, and they were profitable for the first time in their corporate history. More importantly, Precision Dynamics had validated Marcus's investment thesis. By combining breakthrough technology with strategic capital and operational expertise, Chin Capital Partners had created value that neither traditional venture capital nor private equity could have achieved alone. Word of Chin Capital Partners' success spread quickly through the investment community. Marcus began receiving calls from investment bankers, entrepreneurs, and other fund managers who were interested in either partnering with his firm or learning from his approach. The recognition was gratifying, but Marcus remained focused on building his portfolio and proving that his initial success wasn't just luck. His second major investment was in Nanomaterials Incorporated, a company that had developed revolutionary carbon-based materials with applications in everything from aerospace to electronics. The technology was extraordinary. Their materials were stronger than steel but lighter than aluminum, but the company was struggling to commercialize their innovations because potential customers were skeptical about new materials with unproven track records. Marcus structured the investment as a $20 million growth capital infusion that would fund customer trials, manufacturing scale-up, and business development initiatives. But more importantly, he leveraged his network of relationships to arrange partnerships with major aerospace and automotive companies that were willing to test nanomaterials products in real-world applications. The strategy worked brilliantly. Within 2 years, Nanomaterials had secured long-term supply contracts with Boeing, General Motors, and Samsung, guaranteeing over $200 million in revenue over the next 5 years. The company's valuation had increased from $30 million to $300 million, generating exceptional returns for Chin Capital Partners and its investors. By 2010, Chin Capital Partners had become one of the most successful growth equity firms in the technology sector. The fund had invested in 12 companies, with 10 generating positive returns and 3 achieving valuations that exceeded 10 times their initial investment. Marcus's ability to identify breakthrough technologies and help companies commercialize them had attracted attention from institutional investors, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds. The validation was personally satisfying, but Marcus knew that his ultimate goal extended beyond financial success. He wanted to build a firm that could consistently identify and develop the technologies that would shape the future. More importantly, he wanted to prove that success in business came not from credentials or connections alone, but from the ability to see potential where others saw only risk. As Chin Capital Partners prepared to raise its second fund, targeting $200 million in commitments, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him from dismissed intern to successful entrepreneur. The people who had once laughed at his ambitions were now working for companies housed in buildings that he partially owned through his portfolio investments, but Marcus wasn't satisfied with indirect ownership or reflected success. His ultimate goal had always been more specific, more personal. He wanted to own the building where Trevor, Bradley, and Amanda worked. He wanted them to discover that the intern they had mocked had become their landlord. That opportunity was closer than they realized. The opportunity Marcus had been waiting for arrived in March 2015, disguised as a routine commercial real estate listing. Pinnacle Financial Tower, the building that had housed Berkshire and Associates for over 3 decades, was being put up for sale by its current owner, Meridian Property Group. The asking price was $800 million, a premium valuation. That reflected both the building's prime location and its blue-chip tenant roster. Marcus discovered the listing through his network of real estate contacts, but what made the opportunity particularly compelling wasn't just the building itself, it was the timing. Chen Capital Partners had just closed its third fund at $600 million, giving Marcus access to unprecedented capital resources. More importantly, his portfolio companies had generated over $2 billion in exits over the previous 5 years, establishing him as one of the most successful growth equity investors of his generation. The irony wasn't lost on him. 23 years after walking through those lobby doors as a nervous intern, Marcus was now in a position to acquire the entire building. Trevor Walsh, Bradley Hoffman, and Amanda Richards were all still at Berkshire and Associates, having risen to senior positions within the firm but never achieving the entrepreneurial success they had once deemed impossible for someone like Marcus. Marcus's first step was conducting thorough due diligence on the building's financial performance and tenant composition. Pinnacle Financial Tower was 96% occupied, with Berkshire and Associates leasing approximately 40% of the total space across floors 32 through 42. Their lease agreement ran through 2025, with rental payments totaling $18 million annually. The building's other tenants included 2 major law firms, a boutique investment bank, several hedge funds, and a prestigious accounting firm. The tenant mix was stable and profitable, with an average lease term of 8 years and built-in rent escalations that would generate consistent cash flow growth. From a pure investment perspective, the acquisition made excellent financial sense, but Marcus's motivation transcended financial returns. This purchase would represent the ultimate validation of his journey from underestimated intern to successful entrepreneur. More importantly, it would put him in the unique position of being Trevor, Bradley, and Amanda's landlord, a relationship dynamic that would have been unimaginable during his first summer at the firm. The acquisition process was complex, involving multiple rounds of bidding against well-capitalized competitors including pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and real estate investment trusts. Marcus structured his bid through a combination of Chen Capital Partners' resources, strategic partnerships with institutional investors, and personal guarantees that demonstrated his commitment to the transaction. His competitive advantage came from his intimate knowledge of the building and its primary tenant. While other bidders focused primarily on financial metrics and market comparables, Marcus understood the strategic value that Berkshire and Associates placed on their current location. The firm had built their brand around the prestige of their Pinnacle Financial Tower address, and relocating would involve significant costs and potential client disruption. Marcus crafted his acquisition strategy to leverage this insight. Instead of simply outbidding competitors on price, he structured an offer that included tenant retention guarantees and building improvement commitments that would be particularly valuable to Berkshire and Associates. His proposal included plans for modernizing the building's technology infrastructure, upgrading common areas, and implementing sustainability initiatives that would enhance the property's long-term value. The bidding process extended over 6 months, with Marcus competing against 4 other serious buyers. The breakthrough came when Meridian Property Group's board of directors recognized that Marcus's proposal offered not just competitive pricing but also the operational expertise and long-term vision that would preserve the building's premium status in the marketplace. In September 2015, Marcus Chen, through a consortium led by Chen Capital Partners, acquired Pinnacle Financial Tower for $820 million. The transaction was covered extensively in the financial press, with several articles highlighting the remarkable journey of the former Berkshire and Associates intern who had returned as the building's new owner. The closing took place in the same conference room where Marcus had once presented his analysis of data flow systems as a young analyst. This time, he sat at the head of the table as representatives from law firms, investment banks, and title companies executed the documents that would transfer ownership of the 42-story tower to his consortium. Robert Brennan, who was now Berkshire and Associates managing partner, attended the closing as a representative of the building's largest tenant. The meeting was cordial but surreal, with Brennan congratulating Marcus on the acquisition while both men remembered their first interaction during Marcus's in-turn presentation 15 years earlier. "It's remarkable how things come full circle," Brennan said as they reviewed the new lease terms. "I remember when you told us you wanted to build your own investment firm." "I remember that conversation too," Marcus replied. "Though I don't think either of us anticipated it would lead to this." Brennan smiled. "I have to admit, your success has exceeded everyone's expectations. The partners are quite impressed with what you've built at Chin Capital Partners." Marcus appreciated the recognition, but he was more interested in discussing the practical aspects of the building transition. As the new owner, he would be responsible for maintaining the high standards that had made Pinnacle Financial Tower one of the city's most prestigious business addresses. Over the following weeks, Marcus immersed himself in the operational details of commercial real estate management. He hired a best-in-class property management team, approved capital improvements that would modernize building systems, and implemented tenant services that exceeded industry standards. His goal was to demonstrate that ownership by Chin Capital Partners would enhance rather than diminish the building's value proposition. The first real test of Marcus's new role came during a routine tenant meeting in October 2015. These quarterly meetings brought together representatives from major tenants to discuss building operations, planned improvements, and any concerns that needed to be addressed. As the new owner, Marcus was expected to attend and address tenant questions about his vision for the property. The meeting was held in the building's executive conference center on the 41st floor. As Marcus entered the room, he immediately recognized several familiar faces from his years at Berkshire and Associates. Trevor Walsh was there representing the firm's facilities committee, along with Amanda Richards, who had been promoted to managing director of client relations. The moment of recognition was electric. Trevor's expression shifted from polite attention to stunned disbelief as he realized that the new building owner was the intern he had once mocked for his entrepreneurial ambitions. Amanda's reaction was more subtle but equally profound. Marcus could see her quickly calculating the implications of their changed relationship dynamic. "Ladies and gentlemen," said the property manager, "I'd like to introduce Marcus Chen, the principal of Chin Capital Partners and the building's new owner." Marcus stood up and looked around the conference table, making brief eye contact with each attendee. When his gaze met Trevor's, he offered a slight smile that acknowledged their shared history without betraying any hint of personal satisfaction. "Thank you for welcoming me to this meeting," Marcus began. "I want to assure everyone that Chin Capital Partners is committed to maintaining and enhancing the standards that have made Pinnacle Financial Tower one of the premier business addresses in the city." He outlined his plans for building improvements, technology upgrades, and expanded tenant services. His presentation was professional and comprehensive, demonstrating the same analytical rigor that had characterized his work as a young analyst at Berkshire and Associates. "Are there any questions about our plans for the building?" Marcus asked as he concluded his remarks. Trevor raised his hand slowly. "Mr. Chen, can you tell us about your background in commercial real estate management?" The question was clearly intended to probe whether Marcus had the experience necessary to manage such a significant property. Marcus recognized the underlying skepticism and responded with quiet confidence. "My background is primarily in growth equity and technology investments," Marcus replied. "However, Chin Capital Partners has assembled a team of experienced real estate professionals to handle day-to-day operations. Our role is to provide strategic oversight and ensure that the building continues to meet the evolving needs of its tenants." Amanda spoke next. "What are your long-term plans for the property? Do you see this as a short-term investment or a long-term hold?" "We view Pinnacle Financial Tower as a long-term investment," Marcus answered. "The building has excellent fundamentals, and we believe that continued investment in improvements and tenant services will enhance its value over time." The meeting continued for another hour, with Marcus fielding questions about everything from parking policies to security protocols. His responses were knowledgeable and reassuring, demonstrating that he understood both the financial and operational aspects of commercial real estate ownership. As the meeting concluded, Trevor approached Marcus directly. The conversation that followed would have been unimaginable 23 years earlier, when Trevor had dismissed Marcus as an unqualified intern with unrealistic ambitions. "Marcus," Trevor said, extending his hand, "congratulations on the acquisition. This is quite an achievement." "Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate that." Trevor hesitated, then continued. "I have to ask, did you know that Berkshire was the primary tenant when you decided to bid on this building?" Marcus smiled. "I was aware of the tenant composition, yes. And that didn't influence your decision?" "Every factor influenced my decision. Marcus replied diplomatically. But the primary consideration was the building's potential as a long-term investment. Trevor nodded, but Marcus could see that he understood the deeper implications of the acquisition. The intern who had once declared his intention to become a CEO had not only achieved that goal, he had surpassed it. Marcus wasn't just running his own company. He was now in a position of authority over the very people who had doubted his potential. Amanda joined the conversation, her tone carefully neutral. It's remarkable how your career has developed, Marcus. I remember when you were working with David Richardson's team. Those were valuable learning experiences, Marcus replied. I'm grateful for the opportunities one had here. I'm sure David is proud of your success, Amanda said. I hope so. He was an excellent mentor. The conversation was polite but loaded with subtext. Both Trevor and Amanda were grappling with the reality that someone they had once considered beneath their notice had achieved a level of success that placed him in a position of indirect authority over their professional lives. As tenants in his building, they were now dependent on his decisions about rent increases, lease renewals, and building policies. As Marcus left the meeting, he reflected on the strange symmetries of his journey. He had achieved his goal of proving Trevor, Bradley, and Amanda wrong about his potential, but the satisfaction was more complex than he had anticipated. Success hadn't erased the memory of their early dismissiveness, but it had transformed those memories into evidence of his resilience rather than sources of ongoing resentment. Over the following months, Marcus settled into his dual role as fund manager and commercial real estate owner. Chen Capital Partners continued to generate exceptional returns for investors, while Pinnacle Financial Tower became a showcase for his ability to identify and enhance value in traditional asset classes. As well as emerging technologies, the building underwent significant improvements under Marcus's ownership. He invested $20 million in technology upgrades, energy efficiency improvements, and common area renovations that enhanced both tenant satisfaction and property values. The improvements were particularly appreciated by Berkshire and Associates, whose lease renewals became a non-issue as the firm recognized the benefits of remaining in a building owned by someone who understood their business needs. Trevor and Amanda adapted to the new dynamic with professional grace, though Marcus occasionally caught glimpses of their amazement at his transformation from intern to landlord. Bradley Hoffman had left Berkshire and Associates several years earlier to join a hedge fund, but he learned about Marcus's acquisition through industry publications and sent a congratulatory note that was both generous and slightly bewildered. The most meaningful recognition came from David Richardson, who had retired from active deal-making but remained connected to the firm as a senior advisor. Richardson invited Marcus to lunch at the Union Club, where they had often discussed complex transactions during Marcus's early years at Berkshire. I have to admit, Richardson said over coffee, when you told me you were leaving to start your own firm, I thought you were making a career-limiting mistake. I remember, Marcus replied with a smile. You were quite direct about the risks. I was wrong, Richardson said simply. Not just about your chances of success, but about what you were capable of achieving. Acquiring this building, becoming our landlord, that's the kind of success story that gets told for generations. Marcus appreciated Richardson's acknowledgement, but he was more interested in discussing the lessons he had learned during his entrepreneurial journey. The conversation ranged from investment strategy to leadership philosophy, with Richardson asking probing questions about how Marcus had built Chen Capital Partners into one of the industry's most respected firms. What's next? Richardson asked as they prepared to leave. You've proven that you can succeed as an entrepreneur, you've built a successful investment firm, and you've made what I assume is a very profitable real estate investment. What drives you now? Marcus considered the question carefully. I want to continue building Chen Capital Partners into a firm that can consistently identify and develop breakthrough technologies. And I want to prove that success in business comes from recognizing potential rather than following conventional wisdom. You've already proven that, Richardson pointed out. To some people, Marcus agreed. But there are always new challenges, new opportunities to create value in unexpected places. As Marcus walked back to Pinnacle Financial Tower, his building, he thought about Richardson's question and his own response. The truth was that his ultimate goal had never been simply to prove his former colleagues wrong or to achieve financial success. He had wanted to demonstrate that someone who was consistently underestimated could build something significant and lasting. The acquisition of Pinnacle Financial Tower represented the completion of that demonstration. When Trevor, Bradley, and Amanda arrived at work each morning, they walked through a lobby owned by the intern they had once mocked. When they attended meetings on the 42nd floor, they were conducting business in a building owned by someone they had deemed unfit for leadership. But Marcus had learned that the sweetest revenge was success that transcended personal validation. Chen Capital Partners had created jobs for hundreds of people, generated billions of dollars in value for investors, and helped bring revolutionary technologies to market. The building acquisition was satisfying not because it proved his former colleagues wrong, but because it demonstrated his ability to recognize and capitalize on opportunities that others missed. 23 years after walking through those lobby doors as a nervous intern, Marcus Chen had returned as the building's owner. The journey from dismissed intern to successful entrepreneur was complete, but Marcus knew that his most important achievements still lay ahead. Success wasn't a destination, it was proof of the potential that had always existed, waiting for someone with the vision and persistence to unlock it. The people who had laughed when he said he'd be CEO one day were no longer laughing. They were paying rent to the building he owned, working in offices that operated according to his decisions, and witnessing daily evidence that they had fundamentally misjudged the quiet intern who had always believed he could build something extraordinary. Marcus Chen had kept his promise to himself. He had become exactly what he had always claimed he could be, a leader, an entrepreneur, and living proof that the greatest opportunities often belong to those who refuse to accept other people's limitations on their potential. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.